My name's Laura Miner. I am the outgoing Western Regional Representative and incoming Vice Chair. So we're at that phase right now where we're switching roles. But tonight we're hosting Denver Health, so I'm very excited to be hosting you guys, and thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us tonight. I know you're very busy all the time, so we definitely appreciate this. And then for students who are on in the chat, I have my email address if you ever have any questions throughout the process. We have only one more showcase after this, but if you ever have any questions about anything, feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer any of those questions. And then I also put a link to our EM benefits. There's a ton of ways to get involved, student benefits, leadership opportunities, that kind of stuff. So if you're ever interested or have any questions about that, again, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer those. And so with that, it's pretty simple from here. I'll let you guys, we're going to keep the same structure. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves and then we'll do the presentation. And then after that, I will open it up for a Q&A. And like I said, I'll monitor both the chat and the Q&A and read questions as they come in. And if we get too much of an awkward silence, then I have plenty of questions to fill the time. Yeah, that's it from me. I'll let you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves. And thank you again for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Laura, and thanks for having us and for setting up the opportunity. I'm Gannon Sungar. I am the program director for the Denver Health Residency. I can give you just a brief background. I grew up in Northern California, did my undergrad on the East Coast at Dartmouth, did my medical school at Touro University in California, and then actually did my residency training at Denver Health. I graduated in 2016 and had been part of the faculty and the education leadership team for the past 9 years. I've been the program director now for 2 years. And obviously I'm biased having gone through the program, but I'm excited to share the strengths and the things we love about training in Denver with y'all now. With that, I'll turn it over to Tanner to introduce himself.
Hi, y'all. My name is Tanner. I'm one of the PGY4 and Chief Residents. I grew up in Eastern Montana in a small farming community and then did undergrad at Montana State in Bozeman and then medical school at the University of Washington in Seattle, and then came here for my residency training. And I'm excited to share what I love about Denver Health.
Hey, everybody. I'm Eric. I'm also one of the fourth year chief residents here. I'm originally from Texas, Dallas to be exact. Did my undergrad at UT Austin and medical school at University of Texas Medical Branch. So to kind of Texas through and through. And I believe I'm changed and come to Coloradans, doing out my residency here, going to stick around for fellowship. And with that being said, I'm excited to talk about our residency, hopefully answer any questions you may have and give you a little bit more insight into our program. Should I start the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Let me see if I can share. Let me make sure it'll, let me see. Let's try that. How's that? Can everybody see the PowerPoint okay? Sweet. All righty. Okay, let's get started. So this PowerPoint, hopefully we highlight kind of things about our residency. If there's any questions as I'm giving this PowerPoint, feel free to, I guess you can unmute or however you want to do it, but we're happy to answer whatever questions arise. So just going on, this is the slide that highlights our leadership team here. You're meeting, I guess you've met now the great Dr. Sungar, but we have a host of great program directors, associate program directors, and supervisors, and they're all listed as shown. And with that, we kind of have two main hospital systems we work out of, and kind of these are the respective leaders. On to my left, you have Dr. Wolf, who's the Director of Service of Emergency Medicine at Denver Health. And to my right, you have Dr. Rich Zane, who's the Department Chair of Emergency Medicine at the University of Colorado. On this slide, we have our 2024-2025 chief residents here, and though we're finishing our tenure, we're excited about the 2025-2026 chiefs, which I selfishly did not highlight and just kept ourselves because we still got about a month left. And with that being said, our mission is quite simple. We're essentially committed to equity, compassion, leadership, and well-being while cultivating master clinicians through resident ownership of diverse academic and high-volume clinical environments. We were originally founded in 1974, which gives us a rich history and vast alumni network. And though we have lots of history to learn from, we also have lots to build from. For those who are interested in the somewhat quick reading the older days of the Denver Health Emergency Department, The Knife and Gun Club is a good book to pick up and read more of what they say the early days of our emergency department were like. So now I want to talk about a little bit of our hospital sites and our rotations. And so we'll start with Denver Health, which essentially is our home base. It's a mission-driven county hospital, level 1 trauma center, who's got both a pediatric and emergency department. We're a level 1 trauma center. And interestingly enough, the Denver kind of EMS system runs out through our hospital, which is actually quite unique. And we tend to pride ourselves that Denver Health is a residency or kind of resident run emergency department where we see volume, we see acuity, and we have complete ownership and quite lots of autonomy, if I'm honest with you. But we'll spend about half our time here. The next site where we spend about the other half of our time is the University of Colorado Hospital, or otherwise known as the U. This is our home away from home. It's also a level 1 trauma center. It's located in Aurora. You'll spend a lot of time your first, second, and third years here, and some of your fourth. Will break down the clinical curriculum at a later slide. But this is a kind of quaternary hospital. They got every kind of specialty you could think of: transplant center, BMT, and so large kind of academic faculty settled here. Lots of pioneering and I would say state of the art. I guess the emergency department itself is recognized on flow, and we have quite every specialty service you can think of, and so it complements our home base or Denver Health quite well. Another kind of a more recent addition hospital site I want to highlight is the Highlands Ranch, or University of Colorado Highlands Ranch. It's our newest community site. We started rotating out there this year, and it's quite more so recently become a residency favorite. And so you got Denver Health, which is our county, the U, which is our academic, and then here, which is our community site. It's a level 3 trauma center. And we get to do our own reductions, get to work with, interestingly enough, lots of our Denver Health alumni here, as well as other community clinicians, but it's been a really great addition. We have our Children's Hospital of Colorado. Well, we do some of our pediatric clinical time here. It's a level 1 pediatric trauma center. You'll typically rotate here our second and third year, as well as we'll do a pediatric ICU rotation, which is, I don't care wherever you go, you can't see enough pediatrics, and getting this rotation, I think, is a gem. You see all those rare diseases, metabolic disorders, et cetera, that you read and are tested on throughout medical school. And it's been a really great experience. So now I'm going to break it down as far as our clinical curriculum by year. But to start, we'll start with our intern year, where you'll spend about 26 weeks in the emergency department. 20 of those weeks will be adult emergency medicine focused, and about 6 of those weeks will be at the pediatric emergency medicine focused. We'll also have 2 weeks of anesthesia where you'll be comfortable kind of intubating. You'll spend some time not only intubating adults in the operating room, but also children or the pediatric cases, which is great. You get about 2 weeks of an EKG course where you get comfortable reading EKGs, identifying STEMIs, et cetera. 2 weeks with ultrasound, which obviously ultrasound is the new stethoscope, so you'll get comfortable doing fast exams, identifying appropriate cardiac use, gallbladder, kidneys, et cetera. You'll spend a week doing some EMS time, which is, I think, super important just to understand the perspectives of our pre-hospital providers, and we have a great EMS program here. We're pretty ICU heavy, so you spend about 8 weeks in the medical ICU, which I think all of us who are emergency medicine love critical care, so we'll get plenty of that and get comfortable with drips, pressors, et cetera. You'll spend about 3 weeks in our orthopedic rotation, although that may be subject to change for another orthopedic experience, but regardless, you'll learn how to do reductions and get comfortable when you should talk to ortho colleagues and when not to talk to our orthopedic colleagues. You'll spend 3 weeks with internal medicine, and then recently added a rotation to neurocritical care, where you get comfortable doing neurologic exams and working with our neurosurgery colleagues, and 4 weeks of vacation, which of course you can't forget. This is followed by our second year, where you spend about 37 weeks in the emergency department. And just to break down those weeks, you'll spend about 10 weeks as a Denver Health pullback, which is what we call our medicine side at Denver Health, where you'll run essentially a 16-bed zone with just you and the attending, and very intentionally pushed through your second year. And so you're learning how to see new patients, manage flow, making sure you're dispositioning patients. And so you're very intentionally pushed, and there's a lot of growth this year. You also spend about 15 weeks at the university to what I would call a pullback equivalent, or it's called the silver zone, where you'll have essentially a 13-bed zone with just you and the attending, and the same purpose, getting comfortable with volume, flow, seeing different pathologies, acuities, and making sure you're not only able to manage sick patients, but keep the patient zone moving and open for kind of your future patients. 4 weeks at our Highlands Ranch community site, which has been overall received quite well. 6 weeks in the pediatric kind of EM side. A few of those, actually about half of those weeks will be at the Children's Hospital of Colorado, which we talked about, and then the Denver Health's pediatric emergency medicine side as well. We got 2 rainbow weeks, which is just sprinkled a little bit of all over the place, adults, peds, and different kind of EM times. You'll do 4 weeks in the surgical ICU where you'll get comfortable with chest tubes and obviously get close to our trauma colleagues as you'll be working with them no matter where you go, but especially here during our residency time. And then our pediatric ICU time, which I talked a little bit about, but you'll spend 3 weeks your second year at the Children's Hospital, Colorado, getting comfortable with managing those sick pediatric patients and critical care focused. And then that ultimately ends it with elective sick call on vacation. So your third year, you'll have about 33 weeks of emergency medicine time. So second year, you're doing the medicine side at Denver Health, which we call our pullback. And then your third year, doing Denver Health Trauma Junior, which is it's also at Denver Health, but it's more trauma focused. It's a much bigger zone. You're doing about 22 beds. Like the same thing, getting comfortable with seeing trauma patients. You still get sick medical patients, but you have a bigger zone intentionally while you're not only seeing patients, but managing the flow, making sure patients are getting seen, discharged, and keeping the zone moving, which is, I think, super rewarding, though challenging, but very cool. And then following that up, you'll get 18 weeks at the University of Colorado, where as a third year, you have your own zone, but you're also managing with that zone an intern, teaching, and you have access to all the front rooms. And so you're managing, which I believe there's 4 front rooms at the University of Colorado. So you're leading all the resuscitations there, which is, I think, super cool. And so you start getting pushed with that leadership experience your third year. And then you spend about 3 weeks in the pediatric side, which is also at Children's Hospital, Colorado. You get about 2 weeks of elective time, a week of EMS, and then you get toxicology, about 2 weeks. We have, I think, every other attending at Denver Health in the U seems to be a toxicologist, which is super great because they're all super smart. You learn a ton, and you get to work quite closely with them. We do a 3 weeks of medical ICU your third year, but as opposed to your intern year, you're actually the senior on, so you're admitting patients, you're in charge of a team. And they're not only managing the team, but you have more of an input on those decisions. And so it's really cool to round out your critical care experience. You do a week of advanced ultrasound, which obviously you're in year. To be fair, you learn how to hold an ultrasound probe, you learn how to find the organs, but this course is specific where you get to do VEXs, calculate ejection fractions, so it's a step above your basic ultrasound knowledge, which I think is critical and super helpful. And then you get about 3 weeks of sick call and 4 weeks of vacation. Last but not least, our fourth year, where you get about 29 weeks in the emergency department. I would say the gem of our fourth year is our Denver Health senior role, where you're the senior at Denver Health. Not only are you in charge of going to all the resuscitations on both the trauma and the medicine side, but you have your own kind of observation zone, which we call MedFlex. You're crucial in kind of managing zone flow, getting patients disposition. You work closely with the nurses, closely with the charge nurse, and figure out what the emergency department needs to continue to stay open, see patients, and avoid divert. While at the same time, you're in charge of teaching medical students and overseeing the interns patients. So still intentionally push. It doesn't get easier, but it's definitely gets more rewarding. And with every year, there's growth, and I've really enjoyed it. I think I'm now officially done with my senior kind of rotation weeks, but it's been super rewarding. It's definitely the gem of fourth year. You go back and you do a couple weeks in our medicine zone at Denver Health, and then another, I think, crucial emergency medicine time our fourth year is UC Health Blue Zone, which is 3 weeks where you're overseeing a zone with the APPs. And so you're essentially learning how to manage APPs and manage the zone and kind of work closely with them, which I think is super crucial, especially in our field. You get some community time at Highlands Ranch, some time in the pediatric emergency department, though as a fourth year on the pediatric side, this is all mostly done at Denver Health's pediatric emergency department, where you're leading that department, you're seeing patients, you work a lot of overnight shifts, but you're essentially the sole provider overnight. So you see all the pediatric patients that come in, you're the only provider. And so it pushes you to not only be comfortable, but you're still growing in that field and in that role. And though scary, I think it's super important and especially prepares you for attending hood, which I think is great. You get your 2 weeks of OB, which obviously I need to be comfortable with delivery, and what better time than before you go practice on your own. You get 2 weeks of tox EMS, a week of neonatal resuscitation, which kind of is equally as important. We have instructional senior, which is essentially like a teaching attending, where you spend a week at the Denver Health adult senior side where you're teaching medical students and staffing with them, which is great. And then one of the last rotations to highlight is the orthopedics rotation at Werner Park, where you either, if you decide to work summer or winter, at one of our ski clinics. So you can see not only snowboarding injuries, you get to reduce injuries, you get to reduce and see different kind of fracture patterns and how badly hurt people from Texas, especially Texans unfortunately get hurt when they decide to ski for the first time. But if you choose to go there in the summer, you also see quite the amount of mountain biking accidents and associated injuries, which I think is really great. And then, of course, you have elective and sick call on vacation. Any questions yet? Great. All right. Keep on moving. One of the things I do want to highlight, and obviously I'm speaking of our kind of rotations now, and I believe there's a curriculum meeting to happen at some point. So there may be some changes, but our leadership is quite receptive to feedback. And so if there's a rotation that once had a purpose and it's no longer meeting its purpose, leadership will work with said rotation, make the appropriate changes to meet its purpose, if you will. And so there's been some prior changes for our curriculum that were failing to meet our requirements. And for example, we are no longer doing a trauma surgery rotation, though its original purpose was to get comfortable with trauma consults, but then it became overseeing surgical bed patients. And so that's since has disappeared. Same with our neurosurgery rotation and our burn IC rotation. And in response to meet our educational needs or desires as a class, we've had our MICU senior rotation added, which is great. It helps round out our critical care time, which is you get a lot more comfortable, but I think super well received. We've also had our winter sports medicine rotation, the winter park rotation I was just speaking of, because I think no matter where you go, you always want more orthopedic experience. And so that's definitely been a positive change. And then we've added the UC Health Blue Zone fourth year rotation, which I think allows us to be comfortable not only managing the zone, but working closely and having APP staff with us, which I think has been equally as educational. We've also have a new schedule template, which I'll be touching on in the next slide here. And then our new community experience, UC Health Highlands Ranch. As you can see here, we have a new schedule as of this year. And I believe at the end of the year, it's going to be voted on to see if it stays, which it seems like it will since it tends to be more popular. But I don't know how to describe what we had before, but we used to work 2 days, 2 swings, 2 nights, and then rapid cycle to a day the next day. It sounds weird. I used to like it, but regardless, as of now, we're doing a 4-day block schedule. I put an example. And so we're doing either 4 days with a day off, 4 evenings with a day off, or 4 nights with a post and a day off. That's what we're doing right now. The residents really seem to love it, and they'll be either confirming or changing based on a residency-wide vote at the end of the year. Of course, we work 8-hour shifts, and regardless of changing our schedule pattern, that still has been the same. We have Wednesday mornings off for conference. So here we use the graduated responsibility model. And though when people hear that, they think, oh, great, I'm going to go through the yearly pattern and be held back. And so I want to highlight, though, we have a graduated responsibility model, which will intentionally push you each year. It'll never hold you back. And so if you feel like your first day and you want to try to senior the department, I have yet to see that. But if you're wanting to, maybe allow you to try, I don't know, it depends on your attending. But the whole purpose is you're intentionally pushed each year, but you'll never be held back. And so our intern year, you're seeing your bread and butter kind of emergency medicine. You have a front room as an intern, and you're typically staffing with the senior and the attending. This is followed by our second year, and I touched on the pullback and kind of silver junior rotations. You're in charge of more beds. You're seeing more patients, higher volume, and as opposed to your intern year where you're either staffing with the senior and the attending, your second year, it's just you and the attending typically. This is also followed by our third year where you get essentially pushed more, and not only are you seeing more beds on the trauma junior side, but at the university, not only do you have a zone, but now you're in charge of all the front rooms and running all the resuscitations that come in at the university. And then lastly, I talked about our senior role at the Denver Health and not only managing the emergency department, answering the biophone calls, working closely with the chargers to keep departmental flow, identifying roadblocks and what's holding each zone up, and supporting your pullback intern, supporting your trauma junior resident. And so it's very intentional, and I can't emphasize enough what a gem of a rotation this is. And so I think overall, and as you can see in our model, every year you're intentionally pushed, and we believe in growth via exposure. And so the more you see, typically the more you know. And so you get high autonomy with high patient volumes, you're pushed intentionally, and we pride ourselves in seeing quite a great number of patients. And so that ultimately translates into more patients per hour seen. I want to emphasize, though, you're seeing more patients, you're seeing more acuity, but you're also being comfortable with flow. And I think we're hitting all the tenets of emergency medicine, which I think is super important. And by the time you're a fourth year, you're quite comfortable with which patients are going to take more time, what patients you can disposition to keep the zone moving. And it's a really, I think, one of the great aspects of our program that you will get comfortable not only with flow, but managing critically ill patients at the same time. So we have weekly conferences here, and this is one of our gyms. During our weekly conference, we have our morbidity mortality conference, and in these conferences, we talk about interesting cases. We talk about my cases, our colleagues' cases, and learn not only from our co-residents input, but also our attending input, which I think is super great. Along with our weekly conference, we tend to have visiting lecturers, we have small groups, we have procedure labs, etc. We have talked a little bit in the clinical curriculum about our pediatric and kind of rotation. So regardless of the pediatric department, but mostly at Denver Health, you tend to be head of bed or as the senior year leader of all the trauma and medical resuscitations at Denver Health. You get about 6 weeks of pediatric time or your fourth year, and you tend to work these overnight solo shifts where you're the sole provider. You're essentially have to be ready for whatever comes into that door. You get children's ED time at the Children's Hospital of Colorado and spend our pediatric ICU time there, which is also super great. We also do have throughout the year dedicated pediatric morbidity and mortality conferences where we learn through interesting cases that kind of either we or our colleagues have seen. And then as a fourth year, you get time with neonatal resuscitation and get certified as a fourth year. So we have quite a bit of ultrasound faculty, and I would say our ultrasound education at our program is quite strong. And I think it's super important, especially as it continues to advance and its diagnostic utility becomes more apparent. But you do about 2 weeks of your intern year, and then we have the 1 week of the advanced ultrasound course our third year. But throughout the kind of 4 years here, you're going to be working with ultrasound faculty and using ultrasound. And so that's constantly reinforced. And so ultimately, by the time you're a fourth year, honestly, second or third year, you're quite comfortable with the ultrasound. We also have dedicated ultrasound labs and plenty of teaching opportunities as well to spread the love of ultrasound, if you will. As far as research goes, we're the 8th most EM research funding in the nation or funded in the nation. If that's something you like, great. If that's not something you like, that's okay too. But we have faculty in all different aspects of research, whether if it's in trauma or DEI, et cetera. And so it's quite easy to find a mentor and get stipends for not only research funding, but travel for conferences, et cetera. And so it's something that not only can you dedicate your elective time to, but get involved in, honestly, from day one. We have a pretty strong EMS program, and we have a unique kind of EMS program in that the Denver Health kind of EMS agency runs through the Denver Health Medical Center. And so the Denver Health paramedics, we work quite closely with them, and there's tons of teaching opportunities, and not only at the medic school, but involvement in kind of events with our Denver paramedics. We also have dedicated M&M conferences. And so if EMS is something you're interested in, we definitely have the exposure. I just realized that's Taylor Swift. That's pretty cool. Oh, geez. Okay, come here and you meet Taylor Swift too. I think Gannon told me that. And then as far as our elective time, we get 14 weeks of total individualized time. And you can honestly you can be very creative with your electives. And so we have some residents that have put a couple weeks together and have gone under us and done Spanish immersion. We have other electives set up, whether it's research time, if you want to do time in critical care, et cetera. And we have built-in EM or elective time throughout our, I guess I would say, your second, third, and fourth years, and you can use them quite liberally. We have some career tracks, which are typically faculty and resident co-led. There's 6 here, but I believe as of this year, we have palliative care and sports medicine. And so these tracks are great if you're interested in those fields, because not only do they pair you with faculty, but also with residents who are either applying or interested in those similar fields. And you can join these tracks as early as intern year to help you set up for success when you do apply to whatever career/fellowship you're interested in. We also have a ton of fellowships that we offer. And so with that comes kind of experts in the field and kind of program directors or fellowship directors. And so if there's a field you're interested in, you can get mentorship quite early on. And not only that, but get involved with research in that field to help you set up. So if you're interested in critical care, we have faculty in our own emergency department who have done critical care. And so they can help guide you in the right direction. Same with toxicology, which, to be fair, I think is probably the most popular fellowship that our faculty have, if you will. But you name the fellowship, we have it, and we can kind of help you get set up for success. So we've been around since 1974. We have tons of graduates, and with that come lots of vast alumni network and lots of connections. And if there's a hospital you're interested in, we probably have faculty in the surrounding areas. And as you can see here, we have tons of academic EM directors and program directors and different programs. And I would say that networking, the Denver Health Network system is quite great. And you get to tap into the network, especially when you're looking for a job, if you're interested in fellowships. And so I think that's been something that I found super helpful, especially when I was initially looking at jobs, but ultimately settled on a fellowship. And I believe even Tanner here could attest to our name and alumni network helping him get a job as well. You probably hear this, and I'm going to say it again because it holds quite true for our program, but the residents are the residency. We're a proudly resident-driven residency, and we have a loud and influential voice. We can make change happen, and there's some examples, but even there's weekly changes that are happening and on our behalf. And I would say it's great that we have a receptive leadership, but it's also great that kind of the residents lean on one another and are supportive of one another, which I think is super important and a sign of a healthy residency. We do have class-assigned APDs, and I touched on our APD group in the beginning, and they also are quite supportive as well. So living in Denver is great. I'm from Texas, and I never lived outside of Texas, and I moved into Denver, and I was pleasantly surprised, not only with, obviously it's a big city, so it's got all the big city stuff, but it's a quite diverse city, and there's a lot of outdoor activities. If you're into just staying in the city and great food, we have a great food scene, dancing, art, skiing, mountain biking, etc. Whatever you're interested in, I'm sure Denver has it. And then I think our residency is quite intentional in having resident retreats and lots of activities and protected time, to be fair, so you can obviously bond with your co-residents. And I think that's super important because throughout your 4 years here, you're going to have some of the toughest times and honestly some of the happiest times, and you'll definitely be leaning on your co-residents throughout. And not only are we quite intentional of having protected time so you can only bond with your residents, but they truly do become your family towards the end of it. So we're obviously quite committed for diversity, equity, inclusion. We have different projects and kind of different examples, and this is also part of our mission statement. But we do this not only through our URM scholarship, but if you rotate through us, you're going to do a perspective taking project. We have evidence-based emergency medicine journal series where we study articles that support DEI initiatives. And this is definitely part of our culture and something that we promote. So if you believe in level 1 care for all, care for anyone, regardless of their financial background, their status, no matter where they come from, then this is the place for you. And so lastly, just to highlight what I think makes us different, and hopefully I touched on some of these throughout the presentation, but we have a true graduated responsibility model. And so I want to emphasize we will intentionally push you every year, but we'll never hold you back. We have a 4-year curriculum. It's quite intentional of exposing you to, I think, different aspects of what you need to be a complete physician, and including kind of our 4th year and talking about the OB rotation right before you go practice as an attending, etc. You get lots of pediatric exposure, and it's more of a longitudinal exposure. So you get enough throughout your 4 years here. And I think that's super important. No matter where you go, you can't have enough pediatric exposure. We have great M&M conferences. We learn a lot. We learn from our peers. We learn from interesting cases that maybe we ourselves saw or were referred. And then we have a pretty collaborative group, and our attendings are quick to give pearls and educational feedback, which is all well received and well meant. We have county and academic, but I think even before and now we have a strong community exposure as well. And so you really get comfortable with all those 3 aspects and hopefully get an idea of what you want to practice in. Residents have a buy-in and have a voice, and we have a receptive leadership, which I think is great. You get excellent clinically via exposure, and so high autonomy, high volume is what we stand by. And then with our vast alumni network come quite a significant amount of professional connections for whatever you decide to do in the future. All right. So if anybody, obviously, hopefully we'll answer some questions now, but any questions in the future, you can shoot us an email at chiefs2025@denverem.org, or you can visit our website as shown. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you so much. We will give you a quick breather. I, in the chat, am putting y'all's social media page. It's great. So students who are on, please follow their social media page. And then while we wait for some questions to come in, I'd like to hear from the residents, but we'll start with you, Dr. Ugly. What brought you to Denver? And are you doing any kind of fellowship? And then lastly, what made you want to be a chief? And you're not allowed to say decreased shifts.
I wish it was decreased shifts.
Okay.
No, so what brought me to Denver? Our year when we applied was interesting. It was one of the years of COVID where they weren't allowing away rotations. And so because I was a medical student at the University of Washington, my only EM rotation I could do was my home rotation. A late convert to emergency medicine, I actually didn't know much about EM programs. I knew I wanted to go to a mixed training or a program with a mixed training model because I knew that I wanted to see EM in all of its different iterations. And then I wanted to be in a city that I could find community and feel safe and included. And when I interviewed virtually, I just fell in love with the people, the way that the residents talked about each other, the way that they talked about the faculty, the way the faculty talked about the residents. It just seemed like a supportive environment because I knew that I also had to live with these people and work with these people. And so I wanted to go somewhere where I was going to be supported as a resident and as a person. And so that's what drew me here. I had some family in the surrounding areas, but hadn't traveled to Denver much. And then I was blown away by the experience that I've had here. I am not doing a fellowship. I am going to Portland, Oregon to work in a hybrid academic community hospital to plug the alumni network just a little bit. The way that I got my job was basically I reached out to a faculty member to say, hey, do we have anyone in Portland that I could talk to about the job market? Within like 15 minutes, I had an email of a woman who graduated from our program many years ago. I was on the phone with her and she said, I'm going to put you in contact with my medical director. And then in a couple of days, I had an interview and then was offered a job before my fourth year even started. And so it just goes to show that people who know about Denver trust our graduates and trust the sort of process and know that we're going to be great clinicians. And then the alumni network is what allowed me to get my job, basically. And then your final question about what made me want to be chief. Throughout my time here, I remember looking at the chief residents when I was a first and second year, just being blown away that they were just such strong clinicians and put on these really incredible M&Ms and were just held in a different light, I think. And so I really looked up to them. And then I felt I wanted to give back to the residency. This place has made me into probably the best EM position that I could be. And I owe that all to the faculty and senior residents that have supported me. And so I wanted to give back to the program. And the shift buy down in theory sounds great, but we make up for it in other ways. So it's been great.
All right. Okay, we have some questions, so I'll actually get started on those. There was one question in the chat saying, I was wondering if you could elaborate about the 4,000 or non-refundable fee that DO students need to pay to apply to do an audition rotation with you. Maybe give some clarity on why the fee is there. Sometimes that's out of your control. So maybe explain that. And then perhaps what DO students can do to maybe be competitive.
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one. It's something I've been fighting for now for almost 10 years. So rotating osteopathic students at any University of Colorado rotation are required to pay a $4,100 fee. This is largely historic, and it mostly has to do with political arguments between the dean of the School of Medicine and the dean at Rocky Vista, which is our local osteopathic medical school, and arguments over state funding. About 8 years ago, I got a 15-minute meeting with the dean where I pulled DO rotator fees for every program nationally and showed that we were a remarkable outlier and that it really hurt our recruitment efforts. And the dean said, thank you for preparing this presentation, and then invited me to leave his office. So I was unsuccessful in getting this done. What I would say to DO students is you absolutely should not pay that fee to rotate with us. I think it's really unfortunate, but it's not worth it. In terms of recruitment, we don't hold it against DO students who don't have the opportunity to rotate with us because it's an egregious amount of money. What I would say is what we look for in many of our applicants is, because our residency training program is such a county-oriented institution and a mission-driven institution, is we look for people who've rotated at other sites. And there are a number of other fabulous county programs out there. But if you're a DO student who's interested in coming to Denver, don't pay the money, go rotate in another county program, do a great job, and we will be happy to interview you and recruit you here as a resident.
Can you elaborate what the experiences are like at the community rotation site? And are there any rural training opportunities?
Eric, Senator, you guys want to take this since you work there? I'm happy to talk about the rural opportunities.
Yeah, so I think they're pretty great. I think most of us fourth year now, we've moonlit elsewhere, and so have gotten a different take of kind of community medicine. And so Denver Health obviously is a county hospital, does a great job and is very representative of such. And then University of Colorado being our kind of strong academic site also gives us an idea of what that looks like. We're now rotating. We used to rotate at a hospital called St. Joseph's Hospital. And then as of late, we've been doing more of our community training at Highlands Ranch. And it's essentially true community. What I really like about that rotation is we're actually the first residents in that hospital. So everyone else, including specialists, et cetera, they're all just community staffed, non-academic clinicians. And it's really great. You get to see a different aspect of medicine. And for example, at the University of Colorado, our academic site, we have a fracture and we'll call our orthopedic colleagues and they'll come down and reduce that fracture as opposed to Hans Ranch. You have a fracture and you reduce it. I reduced trimalleolar fractures, distal radius fractures. That also requires you to be a little more mindful in your consulting. Do I want to call the neurosurgeon who's at home at 2 a.m, or can I mitigate this and deal with this on my own? And so it's been quite rewarding. And I think it's complemented our overall training really well.
In rural rotations, we have a lot of elective rotations. We have a ton of contracts in place with a number of hospitals in Colorado and even in the West. We have a pretty strong relationship with Indian Health Services, a couple different locations, and are working on expanding into their site in South Dakota. That is largely done through electives at this point, where residents will choose to do an elective in rural medicine. We actually are sending a resident to Juneau, Alaska next year to do a rural rotation with one of our alumni who works there. But as you may know, there are new EM program requirements being proposed by the ACGME that will require a rural rotation. And so we're excited to use the experiences we've had through electives to solidify the kind of ideal site for our residents moving forward, and are really excited to incorporate that into the curriculum. I think it's something we've long wanted to do, but for financial reasons has been a challenge. And with these new program requirements, assuming that component is approved and we move forward, we are forced to do it in a way that solves the financial problem. 90+% of Colorado is considered rural outside of Denver Metro and Colorado Springs. And so there's a ton of opportunity to practice in a number of different really exciting environments that are not too far from here.
Right. What advice do you have for M4s doing an away rotation at Denver this summer?
Tanner, thoughts?
Yeah, it can seem scary and stressful. I think the things that we look for as senior residents, I'll tell you the things that we don't look for. We don't care how many patients you carry. We don't expect you to carry 4, 5, 6, 7 patients. I'd rather you see 1 or 2 patients and know them really well and take really good care of them. And so the things that matter to me more than that is your attitude. How engaged are you? How do you talk to, supporting staff members? Like, how are you interacting with nursing colleagues and the techs and that sort of thing? Are you reevaluating your patient? That sort of stuff. I don't care if you know the management for an acute aortic dissection. You will learn that information when you're a resident. What I care is that you care about if your patient is in pain, or if they're nauseous, or if they're cold, or if they're hungry, and you're willing to put yourself out there and be a member of the team. And so I think if you show up and you are ready to work and you have a positive attitude and you can take feedback and demonstrate that you can make a change based on feedback, then I think you'll do fantastic here.
And just to echo Tanner's answers, just be yourself. If you're a good human, to be fair, that's 75% of a rotation. And at the same time, we're not expecting someone to show up and run the whole zone and do the thing. Just see a patient, do your best as far as a presentation, workup, et cetera, and just be honest and be willing to learn. But then also don't forget, you're also interviewing us during this rotation. And so be a little selfish and ask the hard questions, especially when you're on shift, and just make the most of it. But half the battle is just if you show up willing to learn and be a good human, then I think it'll be a great experience.
And my generic advice, not relative to rotating with us specifically, but I think the number one, Eric's right, attitude, work ethic, growth mindset is more than 75%. It's probably 90% what most programs are looking for. But the 10% medical that you're going to be evaluated on are your presentations. And so if you want to work on something, we don't care that you can intubate or do a central line or do a crike. We don't care that every detail of the management of aortic dissection, but we do expect at this point for you to be able to do a history and physical exam and organize it in a way that you can communicate it and build a differential diagnosis that is at least somewhat structured. And so if you're going to spend any time in preparation for your OAs, spend some time really polishing and refining your presentations, because that's what's going to be the point that you're evaluated on nearly entirely.
The 3-minute oral presentation, it's obviously I used it. I think it's on EMRA, I believe. You can 3-minute oral presentation. It's like a little paper. If you just follow that, you'll know how to present. So just make sure you review that.
Okay. Is COMLEX weighted the same as STEP, or do your students need to take both exams?
They're weighted the same. DO students do not need to take both exams.
Okay. Is there something an M4 can do or convey in their application to best show that they are a good fit for sub-I at Denver?
Yeah, I think we use holistic review for both our sub-I and our residency applications. And what we're looking for is people who are going to fit into the mission of our institution, which really is about caring for vulnerable populations and prioritizing kind of clinical excellence and leadership. And so we're looking for people who've demonstrated a track record of that, who've been happy working in a county environment or an austere environment and found satisfaction in the care of marginalized and vulnerable patients. And so putting that forward in your sub-I application, or if we're unable to have you rotate with us because our sub-I spaces are limited, putting that out there in your application is helpful. And I think there's a lot of tools now that applicants can use to signal programs, and we look at those a little bit, but a program signal is significantly less important than us feeling like you have a track record of working in these environments, caring for patients in these environments, and succeeding in finding satisfaction in those environments. And I'll be very clear, like, we're not the right program for everybody, but for the folks who do find that mission alignment with what we're selling, I think it's an absolutely fantastic residency.
Okay, great. As we wait for some more questions to pop in, I will ask the fun stuff. Can you elaborate on your wellness or even wilderness medicine? Today was community service with wheelbarrow races, it looked like, and some goats. So maybe talk about the wellness Wednesdays, and then you guys are always on the slope, so any kind of wilderness stuff.
Yeah, I think wellness takes many different forms for obviously everybody, but like every fifth Wednesday, we'll have Wellness Wednesday essentially. And today it was wheelbarrow races. And I was essentially went to a community garden and did some work, or to a park and did some gardening, if you will. But it was fun. In the past, we did like a ski day at A Basin. I think overall, there's like different retreats off with specific classes, obviously, that not always focus on community building, but wellness as well. I think we have different groups. And so we have a climbing group, there's a ski group, and there's just a general residency group, me. And so if anytime, if you want to go climbing, do something with your co-residents, you can have access quite easily and find people to do it with. I think other initiatives that we've done kind of more recently in discussions with our residency body, for example, the schedule changes was largely driven in people saying, what are we doing? Why are we sleeping the day and then at night and then we're just switching? And so why don't we just have a more structured to allow easier transitions? And I think overall people have really enjoyed it and have found ways to maximize their evening in a more structured way. Those I think are some of the things, but I'll let Tanner touch on others.
Yeah, two things. I think historically, maybe even still today, there's this idea that you have to be a mountaineering person to come to Denver Health and to be happy in Denver. I will say personally that is not true. Like 90% of my free time is spent either running or reading books on my couch. And if it's not one of those two things, I like to go to wine and cocktail bars and concerts. And so if you don't really fit in with the backpacking, like wilderness stuff, that's totally fine. You will find community and belonging here as well. And the other thing I'll say is our residency program really tries to include families as well. There are very few events that don't involve and include significant others and children, unless it's a specific residency sanctioned thing just for residents. Family members are always included. We've had a number of residents who came in with children, expanded their families with more children, had their first children here, that sort of thing. And so I think we try to include significant others and loved ones as well.
Laura, I'm very impressed at your research. I think those photos were posted on Instagram like 90 minutes ago. So well done.
Nice. That's right as I got off of work, so it worked out well. Any sporting events that you guys staff?
We don't provide medical care to the players, but we staff all the Rockies games. And then we staff a number of Broncos games and then tons of special events, both at the Broncos Stadium and at the Rockies Stadium. There are a bunch of concerts. That picture of Taylor Swift was taken on her last tour, so a little dated, but that was when she played at the Broncos Stadium, probably in, 2017 or something like that. But our faculty staff those, and then residents have the ability to participate. We always are willing and welcoming of residents' participation in that. And then we've had a number of residents through our sports medicine track. serve as team docs for high school teams, which is maybe not as prestigious, but is a really awesome kind of opportunity to integrate again with our community.
Okay. For someone who's looking to change into EM residency from a different specialty, will your program look at applicants who might have a harder time getting the residency slow?
Yeah, so we review every application that we get. We get about 14, the last couple of years, we've got around 1,400 applications. We do have a requirement for a slow for residents who are not transferring from another specialty and like to see a slow, even for residents who are transferring from another specialty. That being said, if you're in a program with an emergency medicine residency and you can get some sort of assessment or evaluation from someone within that program or faculty, that can often be seen as an equivalent.
This is a similar question. I'm a rising M4 and recently fallen in love with EM, and I feel like I'm behind. Dr. Mugley, do you have any words of wisdom for us latecomers?
Yeah, that's a perfectly okay way to feel. So you don't feel like that's wrong. And I don't think that you should feel like you need to hide that along that interview trail. It can feel overwhelming to think, oh man, I wasn't the person who was like leading the EM interest group as an intern and have parents that are EM doctors and knew that this is what I wanted to do. I think it's totally fine. Everybody's experience and journey is a little bit different. In these situations, I think mentorship is really huge. And so I would find a faculty member or somebody who you connected with in your experience with EM thus far and ask them how they got where they're at. And then think about what it is that made you fall in love with EM and try to see how you can use that to propel yourself forward. I think Dr. Sungar said, we care about people who are mission driven. And so like really try to hone in on what is it that makes you fall in love with EM and motivates you. And then just find experiences that drive you in that way.
All right. We'll do this one real quick. What kind of benefits are there for residents? Like anything, maybe ski lessons for the Texans.
Yeah, they promised me a ski package and lessons
Yeah.
included, which is great. No, we get meal plans both at Denver Health and at the University of Colorado hospitals, and then you get to eat at the dining lounge at the HRH Community Hospital, so you can eat all the time. We get educational funds that you can use towards your step 3 fees, which I think is great. You get 24/7 access to Denver Health Gym, which I think is pretty great. Obviously, you get your standard insurance and retirement package, which, in the words of Dr. Sungar, it's apparently great, but he told me not to look at it until when I'm sad because then it makes me feel rich or something like that. But great benefits from what I'm told. I really don't have anything to compare it to, if I'm honest. What am I missing, Tanner?
I would just say our retirement match is wildly undersold. It's a 9% employer contribution. So it's awesome. We don't advertise it a ton, but it is a
Yeah.
huge benefit to our residents.
The only other thing I'll add is we have access to the free mental health clinic that's offered through the University of Colorado, which is really great. And so it's really easy to get in as a one-time visit or for longitudinal counseling, that sort of stuff. And we feel very supported in that regard as well.
Oh, we also get coaching as well, which is cool.
Okay. Dr. Sungar, can you talk about what made you want to become program director? And now that you are program director, what kind of vision do you have for the program?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's always hard coming from a program that's been around for 50 years because there's a lot of momentum. And yet I value a lot of momentum, right? I was an internal candidate for program director. I was very clear when I was applying for program director that I was not like coming to change things. I was very much coming to protect what I think is a really excellent training model that is getting harder and harder to do with the changing landscape of emergency medicine. And so I believe in this place. I think that being said, I'm thankful to have a really awesome team around me that cares a lot about innovation, continuing to push the edge in terms of resident education. And I think we've done that with kind of massive overhauls to our didactic curriculum, our evaluation processes. This year, we focused a lot on just kind of policies and procedures and streamlining a lot of the way that we do things in the residency, always focused on how this best serves the residents so that they can best serve our patients. And that's ultimately the goal of what we're doing here. I'm very proud to be an alumni of this program. I'm really proud to be a program director here. And I think we have a lot of great hospitals that we work at, but Denver Health is a pretty special place. There are only about a dozen hospitals in the country that have a similar setup in terms of their funding mechanism. And it's a pretty awesome place where you get to come to work every day with people who also want to work in that place and serve their community. So it's pretty special. And I just feel very grateful to be part of it.
Okay. We're almost at the end here, so I will leave it to you guys to give any last minute words of wisdom or advice for students, fun facts about yourself, maybe interesting patient cases, anything like that. Should I call on somebody? All right, Dr. Bustos, take us away.
Jeez. Tanner muted his mic. No, I think just general words of wisdom and I guess especially I don't know what the majority of our participants are in their application slash kind of interest, etc. But obviously, emergency medicine, I think I'm sure all of us are biased, but it is one of the best specialties. It's super rewarding, and so especially as you enter sub-I season, make the most of your rotations. I want to emphasize, right, like obviously know how to present, but when you go and obviously do the work, be prepared when you do your rotations, but also be selfish and make sure you're interviewing the place. You want to make sure you want to be happy, and I think that's super important wherever you end up. And so if you find a program that aligns with your values and is in a location that you can see yourself living in for the next 4 years, and I would definitely emphasize that. Residency is great. Most EM programs would teach you how to be great doctors. And I truly believe in our program. Obviously, I think it's great as well. And if I could do it all over again, I would choose this program and take care of yourselves. Make sure you're selfish in your kind of application sub-I season. And if you have any questions about our program, you can find my information on the Denver Health website.
The only thing I'll add to that is I think the vast majority of programs will make you a good emergency medicine physician. I think a few of them will make you exceptional. And I think ours is one of them. That does not mean that you should feel pressured to love our program and feel like you'd be a good fit for our program. A residency is hard regardless of the program that you go to. And so you want to go somewhere where you feel connected to the mission. Otherwise, it's just going to feel like work and not a lot of benefit. We have a very special program here with deliberate graduated responsibility. And I know that those words are nebulous, but if you rotate here as a student, you will look at the senior residents and think there's no way in hell I'm ever going to be able to run the department like that. And you will one day. Coming to work and serving the community like we do alongside our co-residents is like one of the most special things I've ever done. And so what you need to do is find a program that feels that way to you. And if that's our program, then that's amazing. And if it's not our program, then we will help you find that program as best as we can.
And I was just saying, I think in general terms, it can be hard in this place to look forward to a career in emergency medicine. And particularly over the last 5 years, there's been a lot of kind of consternation about emergency medicine and the changing recruitment and match environment and burnout and all the rest of this. And I would say that thanks to a number of groups, including AEM and I think the ACGME, and there was a recent RAND report that looked at emergency medicine as a vital element to the national health system. And I think that the future ahead in our specialty is bright. We provide an incredible value to our communities. Our jobs are important. And so sitting in this seat, thinking about a career in emergency medicine, while it may feel daunting at times, I just want to encourage you all that you're joining an incredible specialty. You're going to do a lot of good and you're going to have a long and happy career because there is immense satisfaction in this world.
All right, wonderful. Great advice from all three of you. We're at the end of our session, so thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Dr. Sungar, Dr. Bustos, Dr. Mugley, for taking time out of your schedules, sharing more about your program. Our last session of the series will be on May 6th, so students, I hope you can join for that. But otherwise, thank you all again for joining and enjoy the rest of your day. That's it for today.